Hi, everyone.
Hello all. We're on the last two pages of the chapter, The Greatness of the Good News, page 552 of In Search of Christian Freedom by Ray Franz. And this is on the probationary plight of the great crowd. Even the Christian scriptures, they are told, that is, the great crowd are told, were not written for or directed to them, but for and to the anointed. Paradoxically, all the responsibilities in those Christian scriptures somehow are applied by the organization to these millions of non-anointed members, while the chief privileges are withheld. In a sense, the upside-down view of the organization makes it appear as if, being a joint heir of Christ, a position only the so-called anointed class are said to occupy, is a privilege less demanding in its requirements than that of the great crowd class. The anointed ones enter into their privileged position as justified sons of God right away, and at their death, in some cases after only a relative few years of service, have their inheritance assured, and at God's day of judgment are immediately accepted into God's presence, not 1,000 years later. Not so with the great crowd class. Their time has not yet come, and if they would see it, they must not only labor dutifully under the organization's direction, but thereafter endure a great tribulation. Nor is this the end, for after this they are in effect under trial for 1,000 years, since the millennium is represented as 1,000-year judgment day.
No wonder we're tired.
Christ's sacrifice brought believers out from under law into God's undeserved kindness or grace. According to the Watchtower view, those surviving Armageddon go back under law, as the book Babylon the Great Has Fallen, God's Kingdom Rules states in its explanation of Revelation 20, verses 12 to 13.
And so this is quoting that book. The scrolls that the Apostle John saw opened are not the record of the past earthly life of the people standing before the judgment throne, but are the law books of Jehovah. That is, they are the publications setting forth his will for all the people on earth during Christ's millennial reign. After what is written in these law scrolls has been published and made known, the people will be judged by what the laws and instructions are found written in those scrolls, according to their deeds, not their deeds committed in this life or before the scrolls were published, but their deeds afterward, as long as they are on judgment. All through the judgment day of the 1,000 years, Jehovah's judge, Jesus Christ, can exercise the sentence of
Execute.
Execute. Yeah.
That's a good word.
Yes, can execute the sentence of destruction on any human proving himself incorrigible. But by this judgment day, all men will have the opportunity to learn righteousness. Even if they prove obedient and learn righteousness during the 1,000-year judgment day of Christ, they will yet have to pass the final test of unswerving devotion to Jehovah's universal sovereignty after the 1,000 years are ended, at which time Satan and his demons will be loosed. Then they will stand without benefit of an intermediary before the one seated on the great white throne, hence on their own responsibility. If they pass this decisive test with faithful obedience to Jehovah God, the universal sovereign, first then will he, as the supreme judge of all, write their names in the scroll of life, thus authorizing them to enjoy perfect human life forever in the paradise earth. I remember this because I was a little kid, I think, the first time and it stuck. I remembered thinking, okay, so I've got 1,000 years, and then at the end of the 1,000 years, I'm going to be tested again.
The supreme test is not Armageddon.
No.
Yeah.
It's just the first thing you got to make it through.
And I'd forgotten that their application of Revelation 20, 12, and 13 about the scrolls being open is the publications.
Oh, I know. Isn't
You're
that
going to be
scary?
judged. So just like now, we have to respond appropriately to the present publications, and that's really our guideline from the priesthood we have.
And
But-
given their publications, you can imagine, could say anything. You got to
So
jump
you're-
through this hoop now.
So the publications of the society are apparently prophesied in the book of Revelation, verses 12 and 13. Then Ray has a concluding paragraph. It seems incredible that any organization can rationalize such an imaginative reversal of matters, or how they can justify their assuming the right to adjust the good news of the first century, in effect rewriting the script so as to accommodate it to fit the doctrinal system they have developed. Certainly the International Proclamation, in which they replace the first century good news with their own 20th century version thereof, does not qualify as fulfilling Jesus' prophecy about the preaching of the good news to all nations. When he said, "This good news of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world," he clearly referred to the good news as he presented it, and as it was thereafter presented by his apostles and disciples, not some rewritten script of that good news to be found 1900 years later only in publications and magazines of a particular religious movement. That original good news, heard in the first century, remains the everlasting good news that needs no updating and is the basis for the faith that was once for all time delivered to the holy ones. Those two references are from Revelation 14 verse 6, the everlasting good news, and Jude 3, the faith once for all time delivered to the holy ones. So there's that's the permanent cancellation of all ideas of new light, and especially new light on good news, being published at some later point in time.
Yeah. Well, we were meditating on the passage about the great crowd standing before the throne. And they are standing. And they're standing in white robes washed in the blood of Christ. It's based on that they're standing there before the throne. It's not based on how they react to things.
Their merits.
And on their own merits, yeah. But with the Watchtower, it is. It's all based on you. That's an enormous pressure that's placed on people. No wonder there's depression among witnesses.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to have to somehow make it through Armageddon, then make it through 1,000 years on trial.
And we're not taking seriously that passage then. That's where the great crowd is first mentioned, Revelation 7. They're standing, dressed in the white robes that are cleansed by the blood of the Lamb.
Yeah.
And that forgiveness represented by that cleansing is both for their past sins, their present sins, and their future sins. Whereas when you're a witness, you think of, well, Christ is sufficient to forgive my guilt over past sins, but as long as I'm faithful, he will continue to forgive my future sins.
Yeah, so he's not actually carrying your guilt. He hasn't forgiven you. It's not a done deal for them.
It's still up to you.
Yeah, it's always pending. It's so different from Christianity.
We have peace with God, Romans says. Right? We have peace with God through what God has done.
Yeah, and we recognize that we can't do it. That Christ did it for us.
While we were enemies, yet Christ died for us. And that's, for me, says it all.
Yeah. He's not just buying you a day in court where you can somehow make it on your own merits.
So we're going to link to our discussion of 1 Corinthians 15, the authentic gospel that Ray's talking about. 1 Corinthians 15, and there's a PDF, by the way, available on that delineates the difference between the Watchtower's doctrines and Christianity's doctrines, but also between their foundation of authority, their structure of authority, and the Christian structure of authority based on 1 Corinthians 15.
We'll try and put our email, which is all over the place now, I hope people see it, but we'll put it in the description as well.
Also, the Daniel playlist, which I think deals with the pet kingdom objection. That is that, okay, so Christendom has got a gospel, And of course, you avoid it if you're a Jehovah's Witness. You even call it good news, not gospel. But you at least acknowledge they've got a gospel. But you think your gospel is the real gospel, the real good news, because it's got this word kingdom in it, even if that word kingdom is not attached to what the New Testament attaches it to.
You've made up your own system of requirements.
So the Daniel playlist deals with not only this kingdom objection of Jehovah's Witnesses, but it also deals with the name objection, the thing that sets them apart
All the
from all the other
badges that
claimants.
they say prove they're the true ones.
And not only the name and the kingdom, but also neutrality objection, because after all, one of their proofs that they are the true religion is we are no part of the world. So the book of Daniel deals with all of these badges. So please make yourself familiar with that playlist, because it may be the most important playlist we've yet put up if you want to effectively witness to Jehovah's Witnesses. Now he starts another chapter, chapter 16, an appealing promise unfulfilled. And here's the text he starts with. As when a hungry man dreams and he is eating, but he awakens and his hunger remains. As when a thirsty man dreams that he is drinking, but he awakens faint with his thirst unquenched. That Isaiah 29 verse 8.